Welcome, welcome to this month's webinar, TCM Foodie, an introductory course. I'm Dr. Adrian Larson. I'm pleased to welcome you and pleased to have so many people joining us. And today we've got particularly good news because today you're not going to hear from me, you're going to hear from Kimberly, who is going to give us some great, sorry about that, had to turn my phone off, going to give us some great information. This is the good stuff. And by way of introduction, I just want to tell you a couple of quick things and we'll get over to Kimberly and get going. But the background of this presentation goes all the way back to AcuGraph 3. We're going back a lot of years when we got the idea that we wanted to improve AcuGraph by including dietary recommendations based on the graph. And so when we built AcuGraph 4, we included that. And, you know, it was okay. It really wasn't all that great. It wasn't all that complete. And it could have been a lot better, I'll be honest. And so Kimberly got hold of that and she really lobbied and she really pushed and said, come on, guys, if we're going to do diet, let's do it right. And so she worked really, really hard for a long time, read a lot of books, put together and culled a lot of information. And she came up with so much information that from a computer programming perspective, it was daunting to put it all together. Our head programmer, Kimball, had to actually build and write a custom program to capture all of this information that Kimberly had and build it into a database because it was complex enough that you couldn't just do it by hand. So there's a lot that went into this. The best part is that Kimberly absolutely loved it because she's a foodie. She loves great food. She's always talking about it. She's a real bon vivant. And so with all of that knowledge and all that wisdom she put together, we have a totally cool, not only webinar, but the new dietary features in AcuGraph 5 are tremendous. If you're not using them, I hope that you will be after today's webinar. So with that, we're going to turn it over to Kimberly. And Kimberly, welcome. I'm excited about this. Take it away.
Hello, hello. I'm excited to be here today. This is actually a really fun webinar for me. I have been in the works of creating details for this and even the next one that's coming after this for a very long time. If you know me, if anybody knows me on a personal basis, they know that I love to cook. I love really good food. I love to use food as medicine. So to me, TCM Foodie that's sort of my little nickname. In my clinic, my patients will come in and ask me for my TCM Foodie advice. And so this is going to be really fun. Let's see, I'm going to change my screen here and get you over to my presentation. So as you can see, we've started out, our little tag name is TCM Foodie, and in today's presentation, we are going to, let me move on here. So the reason that we're doing this webinar, a lot of people are excited about dietary. When I do the trade shows and I'm showing people about AcuGraph and they see the food portion, they get really, really excited and they love the option of being able to give their patients dietary recommendations. And many of us as practitioners have been giving dietary recommendations for years, but we didn't have a consolidated way to customize it to the patient. And I remember I used to have many different sheets of paper and many different thought processes in the way that I used to give dietary information to my patient. And I kept coming back to AcuGraph, coming back to our meetings and going, guys, we can do this better. We can take all of this information, we can put it in, we can create an awesome resource, and AcuGraph has what it takes to do that. So this webinar today is to explain, to get you excited about giving food to your patients, recommending food to your patients. And I'm going to give you an overview. I'm going to give you some background information. And we have practitioners who are very TCM based. We have some that are 5-element based. We have some that are, we deal with chiropractors who do acupuncture, naturopaths who do acupuncture depending on your state, your country, and where you live. And not everyone has had the foundation of learning about TCM food-based medicine. So I'm gonna talk about that a little bit today and kind of get you excited. So in this webinar, these are the things that we are going to cover. We're going to talk about a basic TCM diet and why a TCM diet is important. And I'm going to teach you about the real foundation of a TCM diet and where you begin when you're teaching your patient. And then we're going to talk about people ask me all the time, well, can you make this little change and can you make this little change? I'm going to give you the big overview of what it took to create the database for TCM foods in AcuGraph 5. And then we're going to go over how it works. We'll go through the program and show you how simple it is to use. And then I'm going to show you some real life applications of how I use it in my clinic.
Hey,
so
Kimberly,
with that, yes?
One thing I wanted to ask you as you're getting rolling here, because I'm looking at this overview and this is tremendous. And I remember when we were putting together AcuGraph 5, you had to kind of lobby long and hard to get us to agree to let you do all this. How long did it take you to convince us? Do you remember?
It took many, many, many planning staff meetings, and it took we love Kimball. Kimball is our programmer, and everything that I present to Kimball, he sometimes wears a hat that says no across his forehead, because I always try to give him something that's huge and big and hard, and this was one of those ones. And so I got no over and over and over, saying, Kimberly, we just can't do this right now. We can't do this right now. And then I finally got the yes. And how many meetings that took, I have no idea. I've been here for 7 years, so that tells you.
And how long did you spend putting together this foodie information, collecting it all, synthesizing it, creating this program?
I would say I probably spent 6 to 8 months gathering and analyzing and reanalyzing and putting it together and coming up with a system within AcuGraph that was compatible to graphs and everything else. So I would say 6 to 8 months.
Very cool. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted folks to realize that, this was kind of a major undertaking, and what they're going to see today is the synthesized work of months of you culling through and putting together. I'm just so impressed with it. So I will shut up and let you keep going.
Oh, you're good. Chime in anytime. All right, let's see. So, and then real life applications, because that's what it's all about, right? It's not a good program unless you can really use it in your clinic. So a TCM diet, TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, we are going to talk about, when you are treating your patients and you do acupuncture on them and you help them with their shoulder pain, you help them with their anxiety, you help them with their headache, and then they go back into life and they go back into their world and they wonder why their problems come back. And acupuncture itself just isn't enough. You have to add dietary aspects into AcuGraph or into your treatment strategies in order to get long-term results. So if you are treating patients and you're trying to come up with a strategy to turn your patients into wellness patients, dietary information has to be a huge part of it. I'm wondering, can you see? You're not seeing my screen, are you? Hold on, you're seeing my face.
Yeah, we're seeing your face right now.
Well, let me get to my screen. So, there we go. Can you see my mouse moving as well, Adrian?
Yes, I do see your mouse.
Okay. So when you are treating the channels on the body, every channel, when you're looking at pathways, if you're starting with the lung channel first, the lung starts in the chest, comes down to the fingers, comes back up, and then it meets with the large intestine, and then it meets with the stomach, and it comes down, and then each channel, as it does its course, has to pass through this middle section. It has to course through the gut. And if you have a poor diet, you are hindering the flow of energy through the gut. And that's kind of what I like to teach my patients. When I'm teaching about the flow of energy and how things need to work, I tell them I can work with their acupuncture channels, and easy fix, put a few needles in and we fix the flow of energy. But long term, if they are going to help me from their aspect from home, that they need to make dietary changes. So the foundation of a TCM diet, obviously we work with all of the channels in the body, but the foundation really starts with the spleen. And this is a little lesson I give to my patients. This lesson typically shows up, I don't know, 2 or 3 visits in when I am teaching my patients about the spleen and about their diet. I talk to them about Jing and I talk to them about food chi. By now they know me a little better and they know that I'm working on a scientific basis, but I go back to my TCM strategies, my TCM talk when I'm talking to them about the diet. And I tell them that when they are born, they get this bank account of energy. And this bank account of energy is their life source energy. And we call that Jing in Chinese medicine. And that life source energy is theirs until they die. And when they are eating good food, they are adding to that bank account of Jing, and it's food energy that, well, I guess I feel like I want to look at you and talk to you in my face. The food energy is related to refilling that bank account, and if they don't do good food, if they don't take care of good food, then they are depleting their bank account over time. And so that's sort of my little analogy, and it's easy enough to understand. And we'll go back to food. So that's my analogy, that eating good food is what keeps that bank account. If they want to live long, good, healthy life, they need to, at some point in time, recognize that food is an important part of it. When we are talking about food, the spleen is the key organ that has to do with producing new qi. So if you keep the spleen happy, as far as dietary needs, then as far as the foundation goes, we're going to, you're missing my screen again. The spleen is responsible for producing new qi when we eat good food. It is also responsible for controlling the blood. So if you think about all of the reasons to have good food in your diet and to strengthen the spleen, we strengthen the spleen with acupuncture, but if you're adding the right food into your diet, spleen controls the blood. So if you think of the things that your patients come in for, circulation problems, pain problems, menstrual problems, controlling the blood is a big deal. So a spleen happy diet helps with a lot of the major things related to blood. It also controls the muscles and limbs. So think about other pain related issues that your patient comes in for. So the spleen also raises qi. Notice I didn't put a picture in this one. I'm really into my pictures, and I think the guys will be really happy that I didn't add any pictures of hemorrhoids or rectal prolapse. But another list of reasons to strengthen the spleen here. I'm using the wrong buttons. And then the spleen also controls thought. So concentration, creativity, memory. And if you look at if you just take all of those symptoms alone and you come up with a big list on why it's important to strengthen the spleen, that in itself is a huge list of many things that acupuncture patients come in with. So if you can do one thing to help them from a dietary perspective, and that would be teach them how to have a spleen healthy diet, that's the foundation, and that is my first stepping stone for the patients, is teaching them a spleen healthy diet. So when I was in college, I wrote a paper about the spleen happy meal, and really, in order to keep the spleen happy, you have to avoid cold raw foods, choose foods that are easy to digest. just the basics for good eating. The good news is that in AcuGraph, when you're giving a patient a report regarding their dietary needs, we give the basic information about a spleen happy meal or a diet that will strengthen the spleen. So these are the basics. These are the main things that I teach my patient.
And this kind of flies in the face of, folks saying, oh, you need to eat a raw diet. There's a lot of this raw stuff out there. And I know you're aware of this, but isn't it interesting that eating a lot of cold and raw and uncooked foods actually is a hindrance to good health and a hindrance to the spleen? I'm sure you run up against that in your practice.
Exactly. And so patients will come in with all different types of dietary, they're following all of these multi-diets. And I don't necessarily stop them from the diet that they are comfortable with. But if they're eating lots of vegetables, I try to just help them recognize that too many raw vegetables and too much juicing will throw them off course. So I just teach them some basic things that they need to add in. So really it's just a basic healthy diet and changing their paradigm from eating lots of raw salads and raw vegetables to, I teach them about, I said, think of how the Chinese cook their food. They've got basic, if you go for a nice stir fry, the vegetables are slightly cooked and it makes it easier to digest. And so I'm teaching them about easy digestion. So a spleen happy meal, that is the foundation right there. It's about easy digestion, so the spleen doesn't have to work so hard. And most people have some type of a spleen qi deficiency. So as I teach them this as their foundation, it gets them where they need to go. Once I've taught them about the spleen happy meal, then I get them started on that spleen diet. I can then, in time, as they have other types of symptoms, I can then give them food as medicine for certain conditions like yin deficiency or qi deficiency or blood stagnation or yang deficiency. So whatever their TCM pattern is, once they have their basic foundation diet, then I can quickly adjust. But if they've got the foundation when they start, it's easy to make the adjustments later. So AcuGraph 5 actually has everything that you need to be able to teach your patients about basic dietary recommendations. And it also will give you the information that you need for food as medicine. So I'm going to next get into, how we created the database. And this, like we were talking about earlier, we spent months and months creating the database, and people will ask me where I gathered the foods and the information on the foods. So here are some of the resources. These are the main resources that I used for gathering food information. Many of you will be familiar with these books. It's fascinating reading. I love that I get paid to study this stuff and to research all of these books. And that is one of my favorite parts of the job. Let's see. So when I was gathering all the information, I had spreadsheets. And as Adrian told you, we created a database. And as we took each of the different foods that we added into the system, we took into consideration the temperatures of the food, whether it was hot, warm, neutral, cool, cold, because obviously if you're going to clear heat, you need foods that are cold. If you are going to deal with extreme cold in the body, like a yang deficiency, you need hot foods. We took into consideration the route of the food. We wanted to know which channels these foods affected. And obviously I've given you just some basic examples here, but we wanted to know if a food was very specific for the liver channel, or if it was extra good for the lung or the kidney. We wanted to know what that food did. So after we knew its temperature and which channel it affected, we wanted to know which foods were good for blood deficiency, which were good for food stagnation, what was good for yin deficiency. And so you can see the conglomeration as we're putting all of this information together. And once it was all done, then we were able to present you with AcuGraph 5 for the food, to being able to diagnose food as medicine. Do you remember the excitement and how many people were asking for food information for years along the way?
Oh yeah, there was a lot of call for it, and frankly, there was call for improvements. People wanted us to take what we had done in AcuGraph 4 and make it better so that it would be more applicable to a TCM style practice.
So one of the struggles that one of the reasons that we went back and forth as far as creating AcuGraph 5, the way we do food now, is food diagnosis has a lot to do with pattern diagnostics. And so when we created this, you needed to recognize TCM patterns in order to do a food diagnosis. So this was a little different than if the lung channel is excess, then give these foods, or if the kidney channel is deficient, do these foods. We needed to decide why the lung channel was excess. So when you go into AcuGraph 5, you have options to be able to choose pattern-related symptoms for your dietary needs. I'm going to give you an overview and kind of walk you through real quick how to work your way through AcuGraph 5. So the first thing that you need to do when you're in AcuGraph 5 is simply click on a graph. If any graph that you have open, you can click on it. And then once you've clicked on it, there you'll find the food tab. You'll click on the food tab next. And once the food tab is open, you can click on any channel. You can click on it whether it is deficient, excess, or green. Any channel you can click on. So in this example, I'm having you click on the spleen. And notice when you click on the spleen, it shows you all of the different conditions that could be related to the spleen. You've got spleen damp, you've got spleen yang deficiency, qi deficiency, and this was all based on the information that we pulled from all of the different foods and the channels and the patterns related to it. Let's see, then once you click on a pattern, so before we clicked on the spleen and then we had patterns available to you. Here we've clicked on damp. For those who are not as familiar with the types of symptoms related to damp, once you click on damp, you'll see the screen to the right. It'll show the type of symptoms that somebody who has spleen damp would have. And you can take a look at the symptoms and make sure they match up for your patient. And then you'll see in the screen to the far right that the dietary recommendations come up. Let's see. In those dietary recommendations, you'll see that earlier when I was telling you about general recommendations for a spleen happy meal and how to eat for a spleen happy diet, always at the beginning of whichever dietary recommendation report you will have, the general dietary recommendations will show up. And those are the general rules, if you will, for a spleen happy diet. So if the patient is following the general rules and they have spleen damp, this grocery list will show the particular foods related to spleen damp. You can do multiple patterns within the same dietary list. So here I went over again and clicked on kidney. And so this patient had spleen damp plus kidney yin deficiency. So notice the patterns addressed in this list. You'll see kidney yin deficiency heat along with spleen damp. And then the dietary recommendations have been conglomerated all together to show foods for both of those patterns. So this talks about the effectiveness of your list. Again, I was telling you that if you're wanting to teach your patient about general spleen happy meal, then the general dietary recommendations that are listed at the top will teach them how to eat to best supplement the spleen. So one thing to recognize, the list that we had just created, it was, there were 2 patterns addressed. So this was kidney yin deficiency heat and spleen damp. Recognize that in this dietary list, there are foods that are bold and green. So if these foods are bold and green, they are, they regulate both lists. So asparagus is good for spleen damp, and it is also good for kidney yin deficiency heat. So that's an interesting thing to be able to give your patient. If you're giving them multiple patterns, tell them that the things that are bold and green on their list are the things that are foods that are most important to add to their diet, because they will affect both patterns. Then it's very convenient for you to give this information to your patient. You just click, after you've done your dietary recommendations, come back to your graph and click print/email. And then it'll take you to this page. This page has my custom cover page written over here, but click on custom and then click on dietary recommendations. And then you can then either email or print. If you click print, it'll print a grocery list right in your office that you can hand to the patient. And then the other is to send an email, obviously. Finally, it's just that the patients are impressed. This has been a thing that I've been able to add into my clinic that patients just really appreciate. They want food recommendations. They want you to tell them what they can eat, and it just adds an extra element to what you can add to your patients. I'm going to pause here for a moment and see if we have questions before we move on to the real life application.
While you're looking at that, I'm curious how many of the people with us today are actually using some sort of food recommendations or dietary recommendations as part of your typical treatment of a patient. So just, if you're doing something, give us a quick sentence over in the comment window and tell us, yeah, I'm doing it, or no, I'm not, I'd like to start, whatever it is. Just tell us your current situation with using food in your clinic.
Yeah, I'm really curious to know how many people are actually diagnosing food or have diagnosed food for a really long time, and then whether or not you're actually using AcuGraph to use those dietary recommendations.
Oh, also, Kimberly, you were looking for questions, and it looks like Sarah asked a question. She said, will we receive a copy of your notes today?
That's a good question. I'll have to find out from Cameron. I'm sure that we can create the PDF.
Okay. So just the slides essentially is what you're thinking?
Yes, we could create that. So Mary Jill says she always, but it's very basic in general. And that's the beauty of it. Basic in general is the first step. You want to teach your patients a basic TCM diet. If you can teach them the basic TCM diet, then when they come in and they have food stagnation after a vacation, then you can give them foods that will help resolve the food stagnation. And we're going to get into that. I'm going to show you how I utilize it. Let's see. Brian says, currently not. Once in a while, patients ask and I look it up for them. I would like to use it regularly. Yeah, another, when I'm using AcuGraph, when a patient first comes in, I don't do dietary recommendations right in the beginning. I actually, about 3 to 4 visits in, I'm able to recognize kind of who they are constitutionally. And by the time I have them where they're a wellness patient, I know if they're a yin deficiency patient, or if they tend to have lung qi deficiency, or if they tend to run towards damp. So at that point in time, I can give them a dietary list that's very specific to their particular needs. Let's see. Christina wants to start using AcuGraph for this. And then Sarah says, I also use AcuGraph 5 for this as the treatment progresses. Yeah, you don't want to overwhelm your patient too much in the beginning. There are multiple aspects, and I'll kind of show you how I'm using it here in a second. All right, I'm going to jump back over to my screen, and we're going to talk about real life applications. So I'm going to give you a few examples of the types of situations where after you've taught your basic principles to your patient about a TCM diet, how you can then customize it and use it for specific situations. So let's take this patient, for example. Whoops. This patient who comes in with hot flashes. When you've got a patient who comes in with hot flashes and...
You need to see your screen, I think.
No screen. Ah, you missed my wow picture as I jumped on. 1 second. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, hot flashes. You know this patient. She comes in with hot flashes. If you can do acupuncture for her and you can get her on some Chinese herbs and you can give her a grocery list of foods that will help to solve her hot flashes, she is going to be really happy. And I'm going to show you how to do that in a moment. Next, you got the patient with the common cold. So this guy is super sick. He doesn't want to come into your clinic, or maybe you don't want him to come into your clinic today. Or if you do, you don't want him there for very long. You're going to treat him very quickly and you're going to send a grocery list, and you're going to give him a grocery list of how to get rid of that sore throat, that wind heat, that nasal congestion, the phlegm that he has going on. You can create a custom grocery list for groceries that are very specific to him. And then you've got that patient with constipation. You can give them a specialty diet that will help to clear heat out of the large intestine or move qi stagnation, and we'll talk about that in a moment. I hope you're liking my graphics here. Tell me yes if you're liking my graphics, because I worked hard to find them. And then finally, irritability. And you can actually have foods that will deal with irritability as well. And so even if your patient is complaining about their husband who's irritable and you know a little bit about them, you can say, you know what, I'm going to send you home with a grocery list that is going to help your husband. So let's practice. Here comes the fun part. I am going to open up my AcuGraph. And so I graphed myself this morning. Here's being real. I've got a little bit of excess spleen. You can tell my pericardium was high. I was feeling a little bit stressed as I was preparing for the webinar this morning. A little bit of shoulder tension. Shall we look at that? You can see musculoskeletal, a little bladder channel. Can you tell I need a massage? I have one booked for this weekend. So this was my graph this morning. And we're going to go to the patient file. And I brought over the images. This is kind of fun. Recognize that you can drop images into your AcuGraph. I dropped these images in. So if you've got a patient who has hot flashes, let's take her first. Hot flash patient. We can go to a graph. You can click on your graph and well, first, let's talk about why a patient might have hot flashes. I'm going to go with the basic. We're going to say that she probably is liver, kidney, yin deficiency as she's going through menopause. So I'm going to click on a graph and I'm going to click on kidney. Actually, I'm not going to click on kidney. I'm going to click on a graph, then I'm going to click on food. Then I'm going to click on kidney. So I'm going to click on a kidney yin deficiency heat. Now we have dietary recommendations for kidney yin deficiency. And since I know this patient probably also has liver yin deficiency, I am going to add that as well. And now we have created a diet very specific for ON with TCM patterns. Did you recognize that? If I'll go back to kidney. For my kidney yin deficiency heat, we've got night sweats, hot flashes, tinnitus, dizziness, red tongue. So we've given the TCM indications here for it. And then we've also given the TCM indications for liver yin deficiency. And they're listed here. So now we have a dietary recommendation for this patient that covers both liver and kidney yin deficiency. And as you go through the list, recognize the ones that are green and bold. These will resolve both liver and kidney yin deficiency. And I can send my patient home with this grocery list so that not only is my patient getting acupuncture and taking herbs, but I am giving her food so that she can be helping proactive from home. And this is really how you create wellness patients who want to be well for life. We want to give them all aspects so that they can help themselves from home. Let's see, we're going to move on to the next one. So let's go back to the patient file. So now we have dietary recommendations for the...
Need to see your screen again.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're good. Okay, so here we have the dietary recommendations for the kidney, liver, yin deficiency. I'm going to delete that real quick from this report, and I'm going to delete it. And then let's go with constipation. So again, I'm going to click on the last graph. I'm going to click on food. And for this one, I understand from my own experience that large intestine, this patient, this would be a deficiency in the large intestine. They definitely could have a Qi deficiency in the large intestine, which can cause constipation, hesitant stool or loose stool, or you can have excess heat in the large intestine, which can cause constipation. So if we're going to give this patient dietary recommendations for large intestine excess heat, then we have a diet very specific to them. And if they also tend to have heat in the stomach, you can also add excess heat. So we've got two patterns here: excess heat in the stomach and the large intestine causing constipation. So notice, again, we've got the greens, which would be most conducive for both patterns. We'll do a couple more examples here. We'll go back to the patient file. Notice, because I'm doing it off of one file, I'm deleting my food recommendations so that I can do something different. So the next two that we're going to look at are common cold and irritability. If I go to my last graph and I go to food, let's look at common cold, and we'll go to lung. And if they've got a wind heat attack, we've got very specific foods for their wind heat attack, for lung wind heat. And this would help with their sore throat, their congestion, mucus, swollen tonsils, and runny nose. And so we're giving a patient an exact list for that. Patients really appreciate when they're sick and you can give them a grocery list. I'm going to clear out that one. And then what was my other one that I wanted to do? Irritability. So again, last graph, I am going to go to food, and then this graph doesn't show excess in the liver, but oftentimes with the irritability, the liver channel will be excess, and there can be liver yang rising. There can also be liver qi stagnation. So here we've got two patterns addressed for irritability. So again, so you've got a grocery list that's very specific to your patient. I think what I like best about this is I can I can go in and I can customize very specific to my patients and what their conditions are and give them a grocery list that's very specific. And the fact that you can add patterns in has been a huge addition. Before, we were just thinking of the channels, and that wasn't enough. You really needed to be able to add the channels in order to get a full diagnosis.
About kidney, and if kidney is high, how do you differentiate between kidney yin deficiency and kidney yang deficiency? Is it just by symptoms, or is there something else?
So in my experience, when the kidney is high, I tend to recognize that there's heat. And so kidney yang or kidney yin deficiency tends to run as high on the graph, and kidney yang deficiency tends to be low. That's just been my experience when I'm comparing TCM patterns. We'll see a low graph when they have kidney yang deficiency symptoms and a high graph when they have kidney yin deficiency. Same with the lungs. When there is excess phlegm in the lung, I'll see the lung channel will be high. And if it's a yin deficiency type of cough, you might see high in the lung channel. But if it's a qi deficiency or a yang deficiency, then I tend to see low. Cold seems to slow things down, doesn't allow the graph to rise up as much. Even then, the elderly, even the qi levels on the elderly, when there's a lot of yang deficiency, those numbers go really, really low. All right. Did we get our questions answered?
Yeah, I'm not seeing any others, but this is the time. If people have questions, just go ahead and type them over there in the chat window, and we'll field that. Do you have more to present, Kimberly, or is this the Q&A portion of our presentation now?
This is the Q&A, and then in a moment, I'm going to tell you what we're going to do on next month's webinar.
Excellent.
Does anybody have questions? I wonder if we're getting questions and not seeing them.
I think that perhaps that could be the case. And I think folks are probably looking forward to getting your presentation notes and then getting your upcoming webinar next month. Looks like Malcolm just posted one.
I got one for Malcolm. So it says, vegetarians and vegans pose the greatest challenge regarding supportive dietary recommendations. How do you like to address this, especially in the terms of protein intake? When it's vegetarian and vegans, it's definitely a dietary preference. I will still give them the list, and I will ask them to choose their highest protein vegetables on the list. I mean, there are definitely foods that clear heat. There are definitely foods that clear phlegm. As far as for a general, start them off with a good, strong, good TCM spleen happy diet, and then give them as much protein in that in general. Most of the time, you don't need food as medicine. If people don't have extreme symptoms, a spleen happy diet is all they need. And I will mention here that when I am, if I don't have a particular pattern that I'm resolving in the way of, kidney yin deficiency or spleen damp, and I am just guiding someone to general recommendations, I will click on spleen. Okay, so I'll go to last graph. I will go to food. I will click on spleen, and qi deficiency tends to be we want to strengthen the spleen. So if you're going to give someone a general diet that is going to be the best for them on a general everyday basis, I might give them a spleen qi deficiency with damp. And these are good foods to have in your diet on a regular basis. And that would be a starting point. Spleen qi deficiency would be my first choice. And just because as Americans, we tend to eat too damp anyway, so I will give them their general dietary recommendations and then focus on qi deficiency and damp. And then I use food as medicine after that, if they come in with a cold, if they tend towards yin deficiency, if they have phlegm, whatever else they have going on. Did I get all of my questions? Let's see. You don't have fat in the recommendations, good fat like avocados, etc. How is this added? I think that there is one sentence in the dietary recommendations portion that says substances such as sugar, salt, oil, and fat should be minimal. So that's kind of my basic. That's as basic as I keep it. It might be good to create a maybe a handout. You could create definitely your own handout of how you want to explain a general TCM diet to your patient. Lots of practitioners have different, a little bit different philosophies on how they want their patients to eat. So if you will give them your basic analysis on a general printout, that could be a good starting point. So if you have certain food you like to recommend on a general daily diet, that might be a good starting point. Mary Jill says, so in general, the green bold foods are best to recommend. The green bold is when there are two patterns. So the whole list is good, but if it's green and bold, it means it was on both lists. So it's twice as good. All right, I am going to jump in and tell you about our next webinar, and because it is already in the works. And if you are a TCM foodie and if you will spend this month just getting to know your AcuGraph, doing basic recommendations, you can have a lot of fun taking AcuGraph 5 to the next level. And what I have realized is that you can take some of these basic dietary recommendations and you can create special menus and recipes for somebody who has kidney yin deficiency, or somebody who has kidney yang deficiency, or liver qi stagnation. And so in our next webinar, we're going to talk about recipes, common conditions. I'm going to give you some ideas on some emails that you can send out, how to take what you have in your AcuGraph 5 and possibly bring in new patients or patients who haven't been in a long time, where you can use the food portion of your AcuGraph to regenerate and build excitement.
Very cool, Kimberly. That sounds great. It's been very informative today. Particularly, I think it's been valuable. Hope it's been valuable for people who have AcuGraph but weren't quite sure how to use the food recommendations, how to integrate them with the graph and with the other things that they're doing in treating the patient, in giving recommendations, and giving a take-home report. So thank you for taking the time to put all this together, but more importantly, thank you for putting together the dietary stuff, because that is incredibly complex, challenging in my opinion, and you did a great job. So excellent. I hope that everybody got a lot out of it today. Any last words for us, Kimberly?
I hope that you recognize that you've got some tools in your AcuGraph that set you apart from other practitioners. Your average person isn't going to go to any acupuncturist and have the resources that you have available to you. And being able to give specialized dietary recommendations specific to your patient at a click of a finger is huge and very valuable to your practice. And it just sets you apart from the other practitioners out there. So I hope that you take this foundation of what you learned in this webinar and you get excited about it and you start utilizing it. And then I'm excited to see where you take it and teach me what you're using and how you're going to take it to new levels, because there are great opportunities out there. Send me an email this month with your experience. I'd love to hear about it, and I can share it next month in our next webinar.
I love that you said, by the way, it's a one-click. And that really is true, that you can just click and have a printout, have a grocery list for the patient. That's tremendous. And what an efficient way to do that in your practice. And as we'll find out next month, what a great marketing tool. So we're all looking forward to that. Oh, Bill asked a quick question. He said, as an aside, do you have an AcuGraph brochure for patients? We sure do, Bill. Contact us or hit our website. We do have AcuGraph brochures that you can take a look at. All right, that's it. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, all the attendees. Thank you, Kimberly. Until next month, I hope everybody has a great rest of your June, a great summer, and great success in using food to help your patients. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.